Welcome. My name is Siegfried. Today, I will show you a brief history of instructional technology. In 1905, the first school museum was opened in St. Louis, Missouri. Shortly after, school museums were opened in Reading, Pennsylvania, and Cleveland, Ohio. In the early part of the 20th century, most of the media housed in school museums were visual media, such as films, slides, and photographs. Thus, at the time, the increasing interest in using media in school was referred to as the visual instruction or visual education movement. In 1908, when the Keystone View Company published Visual Education, it was a teacher's guide to lantern slides and stereographs. In 1913, Thomas Edison proclaimed, "Books will soon be obsolete in the schools. It is possible to teach every branch of human knowledge with the motion picture. Our school system will be completely changed in the next 10 years." From 1914 to 1923, the visual instruction movement did grow as Edison predicted. 5 national professional organizations for visual instruction were established, 5 journals focusing on visual instruction began publication, more than 20 teacher training institutions began offering courses in visual instruction, and at least a dozen large city school systems developed bureaus of visual education. During the remainder of the 1920s and through much of the 1930s, technological advances in such areas as radio broadcasting, sound recordings, and sound motion pictures led to increased interest in instructional media. With the advent of media incorporating sound, the visual instruction movement became known as the audiovisual instruction movement. By 1930, commercial interests in the visual instruction movement had invested and lost more than $50 million, only part of which was due to the Great Depression, which began in 1929. McCluskey, a leader in the field during this period, indicates that while the field continued to grow, the educational community at large was not greatly affected by that growth. A medium that gained a great deal of attention during this period was radio. By the early 1930s, many audiovisual enthusiasts were hailing radio as the medium that would revolutionize education. For example, in referring to the instructional potential of radio, films, and television, the editor of publications for the National Education Association stated that tomorrow they will be as common as the book and powerful in their effect on learning and teaching. One of the most significant events in this evolution was the merging, in 1932, of the 3 existing national professional organizations for visual instruction. As a result of this merger, leadership in the movement was consolidated within one organization, the Department of Visual Instruction, DVI, which at that time was part of the National Education Association. Over the years, this organization, which was created in 1923 and is now called the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, AECT, has maintained a leadership role in the field of instructional design and technology. Perhaps the most important of these textbooks was Visualizing the Curriculum, written by Charles F. Hoban and Associates in 1937. In this book, the authors stated that the value of audiovisual material was a function of their degree of realism. The authors also presented a hierarchy of media, ranging from those that could only present concepts in an abstract fashion to those that allowed for very concrete representations. During the war, training films also played an important role in preparing U.S. civilians to work in industry. In 1941, the federal government established the Division of Visual Aids for War Training. From 1941 to 1945, this organization oversaw the production of 457 training films. Most training directors reported that the films reduced training time without having a negative impact on training effectiveness, and that the films were more interesting and resulted in less absenteeism than traditional training programs. With the onset of World War II, the growth of the audiovisual instruction movement in the schools slowed. However, audiovisual devices were used extensively in the military services and in industry. For example, during the war, the U.S. Army Air Force produced more than 400 training films and 600 film strips, and during a 2-year period, from mid-1943 to mid-1945, it was estimated that there were over 4 million showings of training films and film strips to U.S. military personnel. In addition to training films and film projectors, a wide variety of other audiovisual materials and equipment were employed in the military forces and in industry during World War II. Those devices that were used extensively included overhead projectors, which were first produced during the war, slide projectors, which were used in teaching aircraft and ship recognition, audio equipment, which was used in teaching foreign languages, and simulators and training devices, which were employed in flight training. Apparently, at least some of the enemy agreed. In 1945, after the war ended, the German Chief of General Staff said, "We had everything calculated perfectly except the speed with which America was able to train its people. Our major miscalculation was in underestimating their quick and complete mastery of film education." In 1946, Edgar Dale further elaborated upon these ideas when he developed his famous cone of experience. Throughout the history of the audiovisual instruction movement, many have indicated that part of the value of audiovisual materials is their ability to present concepts in a concrete manner. Various theories or models of communication, such as the model put forth by Shannon and Weaver in 1949. These models focused on the communication process, a process involving a sender and a receiver of a message, and a channel or medium through which that message is sent. The authors of these models indicated that during planning for communication, it was necessary to consider all the elements of the communication process, and not just focus on the medium. During the 1950s, however, there was tremendous growth in the use of instructional television. This growth was stimulated by at least two major factors. Those projects sponsored by the Foundation included a closed-circuit television system that was used to deliver instruction in all major subject areas at all grade levels throughout the school system in Washington County, Hagerstown, Maryland, a junior college curriculum which was presented via public television in Chicago, a large-scale experimental research program designed to assess the effectiveness of a series of college courses taught via closed-circuit television at Pennsylvania State University, and the Midwest Program on Airborne Television Instruction, a program designed to simultaneously transmit televised lessons from an airplane to schools in 6 states. The growth of instructional television during the 1950s was also stimulated by funding provided by the Ford Foundation. It has been estimated that during the 1950s and 1960s the Foundation and its agencies spent more than $170 million on educational television. One factor that spurred the growth of instructional television was the 1952 decision by the Federal Communications Commission to set aside 242 television channels for educational purposes. This decision led to the rapid development of a large number of public, then called educational, television stations. By the mid-1960s, much of the interest in using television for instructional purposes had abated. Many of the instructional television projects developed during this period had short lives. Many reasons have been given as to why instructional television was not adopted to a greater extent. These include teacher resistance to change, especially top-down change mandated by school administrators with little or no input from teachers, the mediocre instructional quality of many of the television programs, many of them did little more than present a teacher delivering a lecture, the expense of installing and maintaining television systems in schools, and the failure to provide teachers with adequate guidance as to how to integrate the use of instructional television into their instructional practices. After the interest in instructional television faded, the next technological innovation to catch the attention of a large number of educators was the computer. By the early 1980s, a few years after personal computers became available to the general public, the enthusiasm surrounding this tool led to increasing interest in using computers for instructional purposes. By January 1983, computers were being used for instructional purposes in more than 40% of all elementary schools and more than 75% of all secondary schools in the United States. Surveys revealed that by 1995, although schools in the United States possessed, on average, 1 computer for every 9 students, the impact of computers on instructional practices was minimal, with a substantial number of teachers reporting little or no use of computers for instructional purposes. Moreover, in most cases, the use of computers was far from innovative. In elementary schools, teachers reported that computers were being primarily used for drill and practice, and at the secondary level, reports indicated that computers were mainly used for teaching computer-related skills such as word processing. In 2002, whereas approximately 10% of the students enrolled in institutions of higher learning were taking at least one online course, by 2011 approximately 32% of such students were doing so. In 2003, 13% of the training in business and industry was delivered online, whereas by 2014 that percentage had more than doubled, with 28% of the training being online. In business and industry, the increasing role that technology is playing in the delivery of training goes beyond online instruction. In recent years, in addition to online instruction, a wide variety of technologies, such as video, satellite, CD-ROM, and mobile devices, have served on a steadily increasing basis as the means via which training is presented. Whereas in 2004, 26% of all training in business and industry was delivered via technology, by 2014, the percentage of training that was delivered via technology had risen to 41%. In a 2015 survey, 64% of college students reported that they used smartphones for their schoolwork at least 2 or 3 times per week, and 40% indicated that they use tablets for schoolwork at least that frequently. In addition, many students in grades 4 through 12 are using mobile devices. In 2015, of the students surveyed at those grade levels, 41% reported that they used smartphones, and 37% reported that they used tablets at least 2 or 3 times per week. There you have it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I will see you at the next one.